Hello, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of the Read Right to Left podcast. I am G from Simply G, joined by my always wonderful co-host Ray from Whimsical Pictures.
Happy to be here.
And this month we are going to be talking about a newly released in English, in print, series called Blue Flag. It's also recently completed in Japanese. So there will be two halves to this podcast. The first being mainly focused on this first volume, what happens in that, and our general thoughts on the series. And then we'll go into spoilers and answering your questions a little bit later. So hopefully people who are wanting to avoid spoilers can do so. And hopefully you guys interested in reading the series.
Yeah. So this series, Blue Flag, is a total of 8 volumes, and it's just recently finished. The 8th volume isn't out in print in Japanese yet. But this series was running digitally on the Manga Plus app.
Yes.
So it has been legally available in English for the entirety of its run, with, just gradually deleting chapters, I guess, in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It's really only, the first few and then the last few from what I saw at any given time.
Yeah.
So the entirety of the series has been released in English, but it is not, unfortunately, available to read, which is why we wanted to kind of split it into a non-spoiler section for those who are following the print release now, with the first volume having just come out, and a spoiler section for those of us who have been following the series the whole time through the Manga Plus app, or in Japanese.
Yes. And both Ray and I have read the entirety of the series. I was reading it through Manga Plus. It was one of their debut titles. It didn't have all of the chapters initially, but they did at one point have all of the chapters available. So I read that way. And then Ray has been reading it by the Japanese volumes. So we do know what's going to happen and how it ends.
We're just making up everything that happens after volume 1.
So this is Kaito's most recent series. It's a high school drama romance coming of age story focused on really 3 main characters, but there is an additional 4th character who is kind of in the main group, as well as their classmates and the people around them in their life. It is very, very good. I think just as a general opinion on it, but it's a little bit different from some of the stuff in the genre that people are more familiar with, and hopefully more people will try it now that it is available via print. It's one that I had heard before reading it. I had heard a lot of really good things, mainly from the Spanish fans, because this did get a print release a lot earlier in some other non-English speaking countries. And so that's how I was aware of the series. And Ray, I don't quite remember how you came across the series or why you started reading it.
Well, I think the reason that I finally, caved in and picked up the first volume was your fault.
Okay, I'll take the blame for that.
Before that, there's a Japanese language learning YouTube channel. I forget what it's called, but the girl who runs it is called Misa. And she had recommended it as for Japanese practice. And I remembered that recommendation when I was talking to you about the series, and that was, I think, the first time that I had heard about it. There had been quite a bit of buzz about the series around Japanese language learning, Twitter and YouTube, because I do agree that it's very good for language practice if you're at an N3-ish level. But yeah, so that's how I found it. And the covers are just gorgeous. So you see them in the bookstore and you're well, how can I not buy that?
Yeah, it's a very beautiful series. Something that Kaito is very, very good at, I think, is their artwork. It's very captivating, and I think we can talk a little bit about the art, especially when we're answering questions, because we got a couple in regards to the art a little bit later.
Just briefly, I want to mention we are using they them pronouns for Kaito because their gender is not like publicly been made available. A lot of mangaka are very private. Kaito being one of them. It's kind of a pet peeve for me, and I think you as well, when there's like a ton of just like random speculation about. I've seen people like, you know, because of this Kaito's a girl, because of this Kaito's a guy, and it's like, we don't know. They don't want us to know. They would have made that information public if they wanted it to be public. So, like, please respect them. Respect their privacy, you know? Just wanted to throw that tiny little PSA out there.
And especially in regards to some of the things that come up in our discussion on this later, I think it's because it's hard to speculate intent when you don't know much, if anything, about the mangaka behind it. So, just a preemptive warning there. Yeah. So, I guess we should summarize a little bit about what Blue Flag is and who these characters are. Yeah.
So we've got the main character. His name is Taichi. He's kind of like a bit of a loser, high school loser. This starts right at the start of his final year of high school. And everybody's final year when they're finding out who their classmates are. And he is very bitter. He's very like, you know, I'm at the bottom of the high school food chain, and that's just how it is. And if I accept that about myself, then maybe I can hate the world a little less. But he's very jaded. You know, he hangs out with his little loser friends who just talk about video games. And basically, on this first day when they have their new classes and their new classmates, he gets confronted by two different people on the same day. We have his childhood best friend, Toma, who he's had sort of a falling out with in the last couple of years because Toma is the grade A, I think you had said all-American boy, and like even though this isn't America, this isn't America, but that is the vibe. He's, you know, he's on the baseball team. He's like the baseball team's ace. He's, you know, got good grades. You know, he's good at everything he tries to do. He's social. He's that popular kid who's popular because he genuinely wants to be friends with everybody.
Yeah, you know? He's just an all-around nice guy and very non-judgmental. So everyone kind of gets along with him very, very well.
Yep, my sunshine boy. And so they haven't been in the same class for a few years, so Toma's like, oh my god, Taichan! Like, I haven't talked to you in ages. And Taichi's like, why is the top of the food chain talking to the bottom of the food chain? And then he gets confronted by this very shy, awkward, clumsy girl named Futaba, who has noticed that he seems to get along well with Toma, and she wants to get to know Toma better because she has a crush on him. So she's like, you know, just wanting to know, like, what kind of things make him tick, you know? Like, what kind of person is Toma, kind of thing. Yeah. So, basically, through a series of interactions, these three end up sort of in their own little friend triangle, along with Futaba's best friend, who is kind of a tough girl named Masumi. And we go from there.
Yeah, so ultimately this is a story about like relationships and friendship, and there's a there's an interesting narrative or question that kept being asked even from the first page really, about like how do you choose between your friend and your lover, which is very relevant throughout the entire series. And so the series poses that question and I think tries to muddle through an answer in the best way that it can.
Yeah,
And it's one of the larger themes of the series.
it's very much dealing with sort of the ambiguity about, like, how do you define different types of relationships, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between a platonic relationship and a romantic relationship? Is there, you know, what is that significant difference? It also talks a lot about relationships between boys and girls and sort
Mm-hmm.
of gender norms, sort of muddling those relationships. I guess, should we spoil the first volume?
I think so. It's not
Yeah,
really
so
that
it's not
spoilery.
it's the central premise, so I guess we'll get that out of the way. Um, in so Taichi ends up sort of developing a crush on Futaba. She's very adorable. um, Futaba obviously has a crush on Toma. And as we learn in the last chapter, I think, of the first volume,
Mm-hmm.
although it's incredibly obvious before that, my sunshine boy is not subtle. uh, Toma does have a crush on Taichi, and is gay. So,
Yes.
uh, yeah. And also Masumi has a crush on Futaba. So she's the one who sort of,
Confronts them about that. Yeah.
yeah, pings her gaydar on him.
And so ultimately the series is kind of like a true love triangle, kind of a love square between the three or four of them, and obviously the messiness of like not wanting to hurt people who are important to you, but then being true to your own feelings and all of this sort of thing. So there's a lot of drama
Yeah,
in the
so
only
much.
way that teens can be dramatic.
Oh, and these teens are like, they're so well written. I absolutely adore every single one of them, even the minor
Yes.
characters.
Yes.
Well, except for one, but we'll get to him. uh, but yeah, Toma, Taichi, and Futaba, our main three, are definitely the highlight here. They are
Yeah.
all fantastically realized characters.
Mm-hmm.
I love just like watching their journey and their struggles. Yeah, through their third year of high school, their final year of high school, as they, you know,
Yeah, which
are
is
being
stress
forced
inducing
by,
enough.
yeah, are being forced by the environment around them to decide what they want to do with the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Even though none of them really have any idea. So I think, that's relatable to anyone.
Yeah. I think that that's the greatest thing about this series is all of the characters really are very relatable in lots of different ways, and you can see parts of yourself or parts of people you know or knew in every single character. There's a lot that I think is very true to life, more so than perhaps other series in this same kind of genre. And for this demographic, for a shonen series, it's quite. It has a little bit of a different sensibility compared to perhaps what other people think of as like shonen romance stuff.
Yeah, it honestly, it has like an air all its own. It almost feels like a drama series, like a J drama or
Mm
something.
hmm. Mm hmm.
Um, and it just feels very grounded. Kaito's art
Yes.
helps a lot, I think. Um, their art is very. There's a lot of attention to detail in it.
Mm hmm.
Um, I know I was sending a panel to you that was from like the first chapter of just like Futaba and Taichi's sitting down in their classroom to start class, and there's just a little detail of Futaba, like, sliding her skirt under her legs.
Yeah.
Which I feel like, especially in shonen manga, that detail gets forgotten a lot. But, like, very real if you've ever worn a skirt.
Yeah, and there's also, I mean, it's a well-known saying of, like, a picture tells 1,000 words. And that's unfortunately not something that always is utilized to the best of its ability in manga, despite being a very visual kind of medium, where there's a lot of subtlety in the art where things don't have to be spelled out for the audience, which I think is really, really nice. Most notably, in the first volume, you have Taichi's friends asking him why he doesn't like Futaba, because initially he really doesn't like her, and he doesn't quite have an explanation for them as to why, but you see, just through the art, you see that he doesn't like her because he sees himself in her, and there's a picture of him looking at his reflection in the window glass, and you know that's like, oh, that's why he hates her, because he hates himself. Okay.
Yeah, because there's, like, the, sort of, what's the word? The mirror, I guess, of him getting... He drops his books or something, and he gets called clumsy. And then his friends are like, why do you hate that Futaba girl so much? And he's like, I mean, look at her. She's so cringe. I don't know how the English translation goes, but that's the idea. She's so clumsy. Like, I don't know. I just feel super cringe looking at her. And then, like, it just goes through, like, her getting called clumsy because she, like, spilled her lunch on somebody.
Which wasn't even her fault.
Yeah. But, like, he's like, oh my god.
Oh my god.
Again. Ugh.
She's always like this. God.
Yeah. Why is she like this? And it's like, wow, Taichi.
Hypocrite much.
I mean, I feel that, sometimes someone is just so similar to you that you just want to barf.
Exactly.
I really love the passage of time within Kaito's artwork. It's something that, like, we talk about with Fumi Yoshinaga as well, that she's really good at just sort of tweaking the facial expression or having the same panel repeat a couple times in order for comedic effect or dramatic effect or, like, just to show the passage of time to serve as a kind of beat. And Kaito definitely does that as well. Like, there's so much subtlety in, like, you'll have a few panels just showing a character's shifting gaze to show that this is kind of an awkward lull in the conversation. Or, that the character is thinking about something other than what is being talked about. Or that there's sort of different layers of emotion going on all at once. And I really enjoy those sequences of just the very subtle changes in movement and expression and gaze within conversations.
Again, especially because manga should be a visual, experience. And if you have characters, or, I mean, really you can't explain that with words unless you have a narrator over the top going, oh yes, they weren't thinking about this conversation, and that would just be really heavy-handed and gross and not well done. Another similarity I find with Yoshinaga's work is that Blue Flag, for as dramatic and, like, relatable and kind of grounded as it is also really funny, and I think there's like it flips very easily between, like, these very hard-hitting emotions of upset and stuff that will make you cry or like really upset, and then within the next page or even within the next couple panels it's genuinely really funny.
Honestly, like, that was something that I also appreciated the realism in, because I feel like in real life we always just like go to making like a quick dad joke or something just to lighten the mood if it gets too heavy, right?
Yeah.
So like, wasn't there that part where I think in the first volume or the second where Futaba is like talking to Taichi and she like starts like bawling, the poor girl, and it's very dramatic. And she like ends it. She's like, and then Toma like said we should get these keychains that are all matching, and like it's the fish from the movie, and if you squeeze it, the guts come out.
Yeah,
and then there's just a beat, and she squeezes it, and the guts come out, and then they both just start laughing, and that just felt very, I don't know, real, true to life.
She's like, oh, and I saw these and it made me think of you, and he's like, the fish with the guts coming out made you think of me? Why did it make you think of me? And it's like really
I love
funny.
that they're like their group chat with the four of them is also called Fish Guts. It's little details like that, because I feel like that's the kind of like in joke that like you would name your group chat with your specific group of friends after.
Exactly. Like it's very, very true to life.
So, yeah, that's Blue Flag is I think a fantastic series. I cried a lot. I laughed a lot. I stopped and took pictures of various panels because they were so pretty a lot. And I think we both recommend it very highly.
Yeah, it's definitely something that if you're not... I think if you're not really a fan of this genre, it's one to check out, because it's a little bit unlike a lot of the stuff that is coming out, regardless of its shoujo or shonen romance stuff. I also
honestly,
think
there's like very few people I wouldn't recommend it to. I think it's pretty broad in its appeal.
It's broad, and it also has like just a generally really likable cast, or at least main characters. And it can be hard sometimes to find a whole like main cast of characters where you really like every single one of them and you want the best for all of them despite all of their issues and all the drama that's happening in their lives.
I also appreciate that it's a pretty like, in terms of gender split, it's a pretty even cast, like extended cast, and we see a lot of different variety in the female cast members as well as the male, and I feel like there's not really any difference in how any particular gender is portrayed in the series, which is not always the case with shonen romance.
Yeah. Yeah, and they all have very distinct personalities as well, which is really nice to see, I think.
Yeah.
Again, because
they all have very distinctive ways of talking as well, which I appreciate.
And they sound like teenagers.
They sound like teenagers. It's like, I don't know, something I noticed, at least in the Japanese volumes, is that like how easy it was to tell who was talking at any given moment, even if a conversation is happening without any characters on the page, so there's no indication of who's speaking. It was easy to tell just from like the style of speaking. Yeah. Because everyone has a very different voice, which I think is fairly rare, I think, honestly, in fiction in general, but especially manga often doesn't achieve that level of, I guess, quality in the dialogue. So I really appreciate that as well. So shall we spoil?
Yeah, I think head into later stuff. So if you are someone who doesn't want to be spoiled for the entirety of the series, thanks for hanging out with us. I hope this conversation so far has gotten you interested in trying the series. And for those who don't care about spoilers or have read the entirety of the series, like us, then keep keep listening.
Stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. All right. So we've given sort of our general opinions about the series as a whole. I guess should we go into kind of what happens in terms of the plot the rest of the series?
I think so.
Yeah, it's a drama series, so it's not like it's super like plot oriented. It's not like Devil's Line last month where we're like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened.
And then they overthrew the government, and you're like, oh god.
And then they overthrew the government. And then the prime minister got shot, and then the second prime minister got shot, and then the third prime minister got shot.
Meanwhile, romance.
Yeah. So it's not quite like that. It's more just kind of the general progression of their last year of high school. But there's certainly plenty of drama to go around.
Yes.
Yeah, where do we start?
So I think ultimately we have this love triangle that does, feature our main three characters, Toma, Taichi, and Futaba. For a majority of the series, Toma's feelings aren't made evident to Taichi or Futaba.
I mean, only because they're idiots.
I mean, yeah. they're self-absorbed teenagers. We all were. But a little later in the series, despite realizing, we mentioned earlier that Taichi does start to develop feelings for Futaba, despite trying to also help her with Toma. And once it gets to Futaba kind of reflects on her relationship and her interest in Toma quite a bit, and realizes that she's not actually romantically or as interested in him as she thought, and more so she's interested in who he is and wanting to be like him. She sees him more as a role model versus like actually being in love with him. And
and like trying to get close to him for her, like she thought that like her feelings of wanting to get close to him were like, oh, this must be a crush. But once she like examined her feelings further in comparison to her feelings for Taichi, she's kind of like, oh, I wanted to get close to him metaphorically. I wanted to be closer to the kind of person that he is, because he has everything that I want to be.
Yeah, he's sort of her ideal person. And then conversely, Toma definitely sees her as kind of like a idealized version of who he would want to be if he was because he sees like that he doesn't have a chance with or he believes that he doesn't have a chance with Taichi. And so he sees her as like, you are everything that I want to be with the person that I care about romantically. So it's a really interesting dynamic that those two have. Around volume 3-ish, we have Futaba and Taichi start dating, which is, again...
That was volume...
Was it?
4.
Okay. Just
big
during his
fireworks
birthday.
Festival.
Fireworks birthday. It's kind of the peak dating sort of situation.
Oh my god.
And then so a lot of the later part of the series does have those two as a couple, but that does not mean that the drama stops.
No.
Not at all.
No. And then we also have like a significant ensemble cast within the series. I think some of the strongest characters who are present in the series are
Mm-hmm.
not in the main trio. So I guess first we kind of have Toma has a pretty complicated family situation. So and I think part of the reason that he ended up so close to Taichi was the fact that Taichi helped him through his parents' death
and getting through the grief of
they
that.
were kids. So they died in a car accident. Wasn't it sixth grade for them? I think it was Shotoku, sixth
It was
grade.
sometime in elementary school. Like, it was not long after Taichi kind of met him.
Yeah. And so since then, Toma has been living only with his older brother and his wife. So his older brother's name is Seiya, and the wife's name is Aki-chan. I think it's Akiko, but
Akio, I think. Yeah.
Akiko, I think. But yeah. So and they have kind of a messy, but ultimately loving relationship. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. Seiya's trying his goddamn best, but he can't quite make up the difference. And I think that leads to a lot of tension in Toma's life. I think that he still very much feels like Aki-chan is an intruder on their family. Mm-hmm. He also feels like he feels sort of inferior to Aki-chan in some way.
Yeah, I think because despite because Seiya really, he has to replace both parents as a significantly older brother. I think it's like 10 years difference, something like that.
Yeah.
So he really had to step up to the plate. And Aki-chan, through that also, like, she stepped in as sort of this mother figure for Toma, and obviously an emotional support for Seiya as well. But in the same way, Toma didn't have that opportunity to support his brother. He's seeing himself as like being babied by those two, or which is understandable because he was a lot younger. Like, he was a child. But it's meant that he feels, I think, just overly protected by them now, and like they've controlled his life ever since. Which
I also think he feels like he's kind of a third wheel in his own house.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to impact on your relationship, your happy marriage, or whatever.
Especially because Aki-chan is pregnant during the whole of the series. We only find this out a little later, but I think he very much feels like I shouldn't be here intruding on this family that I'm not actually a part of. But of course, Seiya doesn't feel that way. He feels like he needs to take care of his little brother.
Yeah.
Which, I can definitely see how from Toma's perspective that would be very suffocating. Especially since Seiya has a bit of a habit of...
being an older brother.
Well, being an older brother, and also, like, because he doesn't completely understand what's going on in Toma's life, he has a habit of saying the absolute worst thing. To 100% guarantee that Toma will never be honest with him, even though that's what he wants, is for Toma to open up. And it's like, oh, that's unfortunate. It's not his fault.
No.
But it's not Toma's fault either.
No. And I think that's something that is because of the difficult situation that they're in, that they don't have parents to fall back on, and that they are more like they're siblings, and you're not inherently going to have the same relationship with a sibling that you would have with a parent, even if that sibling's the one raising you. It's just, yeah, they're both trying their best, but family
Yeah.
stuff can be so hard, and
I just,
ultimately they care about each other. But oh man,
I really love that part. Later on, some source of drama is that Toma ends up at a key point in his baseball career breaking a leg.
uh-huh.
And it's all very dramatic and tragic. But he ends up in the hospital room getting into a really loud argument with his brother because he kind of on his own decided that he doesn't want to go to college, and without really telling his brother about any of his plans.
Yeah.
And Seiya's like, what the fuck do you mean you're not going to college? And, Toma's like, shut up, you don't understand, nobody understands. And
you don't have to I'm doing this for you don't have to look after me anymore. And you're like, oh my god, boys, it's not the time.
And, like, Seiya, like, storms out, like, I'm gonna go cool my head. And, then, at that moment, Taichi and Futaba wander in, and he's like, Ichinose, you're coming with me. And, like, Toma's like, wait, where are you going? And he just turns around and gives him, like, the shittiest stink face. And Toma's like, ugh! And I was like, that is so, yep.
Yep. Anyone who has a sibling has had this shit. You like, it's again, like, the relationships sibling wise as well are just so true to life.
Yeah.
And speaking of the actual hospital point, Ray did mention that it was very dramatic, and like, because what happens is that Taichi runs into the road to save a cat, and then Toma sees that he's in the road, he's about to be hit by a car. I'm like, oh my god, you guys. And then he pushes him out of the way and gets hit by the car. And I think it parallels, because again, and this is sort of the high drama aspect, is that Toma's parents died in a car accident where they swerved to miss someone who ran out into the road. And so Taichi has, like, a lot of guilt over that. Like, he's so broken up because he's like, oh no, I brought up, like, so many bad memories, and I caused this, and he's really upset to think not only what he's done to Toma necessarily, but also how Seiya will react to and like this whole traumatic background of their parents dying. And Toma's just like, I'm just glad, I'm happy that you're safe, and like nothing really bad happened. And Taichi's even as, again, more upset of what Seiya will say, and ready to be blamed for, like, hurting Toma, physically hurting as well as emotionally hurting him. And
yeah,
and so it's like, no, don't worry about it. Like, he's an idiot. It's his own fault. Like, why would don't get upset over this.
But he was also like, to be honest, I just want to punch both of you. But also, you're just dumb kids. So, but so the baseball thing that was happening was basically they just advanced through the second round to get into essentially nationals is what they're trying to get into. Which their schools doesn't have a good baseball team, so that's very like, oh my god, like there's a chance we could actually make it. And so what he misses, I believe, is the third round. And if they had won that game, then they would make it to nationals. And essentially, he says he wants to touch the dirt of the Koshien baseball field.
Yeah.
So without their ace, they do end up losing pretty squarely.
Defeated.
And, yeah. So, and he had said when he was a kid, you know, that his dream was to be a baseball player, and Taichi kept that in his head the whole time. I wonder if the reason that he thought that Toma's dream wouldn't have changed is that, you know, somewhere in his heart, his childhood dream of, like, making toys and stuff never changed.
Maybe.
Even though he wouldn't let him, like, let himself think about it. But, yeah, he's like, wasn't it your dream to, like, be a baseball player? And Toma's like, no. Wouldn't I have gotten into a better baseball high school if I wanted to be a baseball player? But I also think that seeing Taichi's life in danger like that caused him to sort of rethink his priorities a little bit as well. Mm-hmm. So it's like by the time they had that conversation, he was in a place where he was like, I am just happy that you're alive.
Mm-hmm.
So, so complicated.
Drama.
So that's his brother and his brother's wife. Aki-chan is like, she's an English tutor. She spent time overseas, and she has very strong English tutor vibes. Which is great. She's cool. So I guess the next most important character we get introduced to is actually, she becomes more prominent during this whole hospital thing, because along with Taichi, she's the other character who shows up every day to visit Toma.
Yes.
So her name is Mami. She's sort of like, I feel like in any other series, she'd be like the Regina George. Mm-hmm. She's in love with Toma, like very, powerfully in love with Toma.
She's very vocal about it, and she, like, everyone's aware of it, including Toma, like, but they're also really close friends despite that.
Yeah. And she's always angry at this other, like, jock kid they hang out with named Kensuke, who's always like, I love you, Mommy.
Trying to ask her out.
Yeah, and she's like, I've told you no 7,000 times. But basically, she's popular. She hangs out with the popular kids. She's sort of conventionally beautiful. But she's the kind of popular where, like, everyone's always, like, whispering behind her back about, like, what a slut she is, or, like, how she's, you know,
the biggest bitch, and, like, all of her friends are boys because, you know, we all know why.
Always up to something, right? And she is, I don't know, between her and Toma, she's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah,
I adore her. Because after this whole debacle, she kind of has the same idea as Futaba has, I think, is just like, Taichi's obviously best friends with Toma, so, you know, if I talk to him more, maybe I can, you know, be better friends with Toma. But she ends up, like, getting in with Taichi's little geek friends.
Playing games with them.
And she gets, she gets really into, like, video games, and, you know, she's just talking about video games with them. They play video games together all the time. And she just genuinely wants to be in their friend group.
But from the outside, everyone's like, oh my god, she's trying to, like, steal Futaba's boyfriend, or, like, she's trying to, like, ruin their friendship and, like, get in between all, and you're like, oh my god, guys. Oh my god.
Yeah. So, some of them were even like, she's trying to get with Yorkie, and I'm like...
like, okay.
He wishes. That might be cute, actually. They might fit personality-wise. They both kind of know what they want out of life, I think.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so all these ugly rumors start about her, and Taichi ends up confronting her, like, hey, don't get between me and Futaba, and she's like, goes off. She's like, how dare you think that I want anything more than just to, like, be friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes this whole thing, and they end up having to have, like, a sit-down chat with, like, what, Futaba and Masumi and Toma and Taichi all together. And Mami has this, like, incredibly awesome, like, monologue talking about, like, double standards and, like, you know, why can't I just want to be friends with a boy? Why does it have to be weird because he's a boy and I'm a girl? You know, she definitely seems like the kind of person who's just always gotten along more with the boys, and she's upset that that's not okay now, that they're teenagers. She's like, why is this a thing?
Yeah, it's, and I really love it because obviously, even as a reader, like, you go in with preconceptions of this character type. You think that she's going to be, like, the bitchy rival girl who is, like, the one who starts the rumors and who does this, that, and whatever else. And it's only when this kind of monologue and her, like, exploding at everyone about, like, the hypocrisy of it all, where even us as readers is like, oh shit, like, yeah, I was doing that too. Like,
yeah, right? I was, like, spending the whole series, like, she's kind of annoying. Like, is she gonna do anything except pine after Toma? But yes, she is. You know, she's got a whole life. Toma's just one of her friends that she happens to have a crush on.
We see later on, because she has a very close, like, long-standing friendship with Shingo, and he's kind of the only guy who understands, like, her, and that she is just, like, wanting to be friends with guys, and then because of that, you know, girls have always shunned her, so she's always been closer with guys, and yada yada yada. So those two are, like, kind of established, like, ride or die type of friends. Like, you understand me and I understand you, and that's why we've stuck together for so long.
Yeah, their thing's cute. Yeah, so I guess, like, the main two, like, others in that friend group, there's also these two girls who, like, I never remember their names. The one who's always like, oh my god, that's hilarious, and the other one.
Ooh, burn!
Isn't Shingo dating one of them?
Yes. One of them is dating Shingo, and then the other one's just, like, their friend. Like, her another girl.
Yeah. You get it? But, yeah, so there's those two girls, and then there's Kensuke and Shingo. And, yeah, Shingo is, like, long-standing friends with Mami. He kind of, like, gets where she's coming from, I guess. You know, I wish he'd be a bit more opinionated like she is. We'll get to him. But yeah. So, and I kind of like that their relationship is kind of like, I think, did he have a crush on her at some point? I don't remember.
I think maybe, but they realize, like, no, we're just better friends.
And I feel like her whole, like, monologue is almost like a turning point in the series where I was like, this is so good.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I think that's about the entire cast, isn't it?
Really, there's not really anyone else who's worth mentioning that, like, impacts the story. Well, like, there's
Kensuke's absolute goddess of a girlfriend, Tomoe.
Yeah. Okay. One chapter and she stole the show.
She's incredible. Also, those two, like, who were in the, like, the makeup club or whatever, the previous year, the two twins.
Oh, yeah.
I want, like, an entire series that's just a spin-off about them.
They were pretty great. Again, we're talking of, like, female, like, the great range of female personalities in Kaito's manga. If you haven't read it, Cross Manage, which is an earlier work of theirs, is about a female high school lacrosse team, and all of those girls are wonderful too. It's very different from Blue Flag, but if you like Kaito's character writing and you like girls, check it out.
Yeah, that one's been on my list for a while, since I started Blue Flag, because I was like, I need to read more by Kaito.
Yeah, and that one is for people who are wanting to read it. The entirety of it, it's only 5 volumes long, is on Shonen Jump, their app. So, yeah, it's not a huge investment of time. It's pretty solid, and there needs to be more sports series about girls' teams. So, yeah.
In essence, I really don't have any major problems with the series up through, like, volume 6 or so.
Mm-hmm.
But we can get into the controversial territory, I guess.
Yeah.
First of all, I guess, should we spoil how it ends?
Sure.
I
think,
yeah, so,
the ending was so divisive, and I think a lot of people were very vocal about it, so it's, like, if you are not worried about spoilers, you've probably already seen some sort of the reaction to the ending of the series.
Yeah, so the last chapter is a little ambiguous, and it's done in this weird, like, experimental first-person way, but it's pretty clear that, and Futaba and Taichi break up after 2 years, which they had a strong run of it, like, that's, 2.5 years together.
Uh-huh.
People are like, oh my god, I can't believe they broke up, and I'm like, they started dating in high school, they were each other's first relationship, and it lasted over 2 years. Like, that's pretty good. And I think they were both, like, a really important, like, growth point in each other's lives, and that's kind of the point.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, so the last chapter, again, is done in this very sort of ambiguous way, but it seems to be, or I would say it's fairly obvious that, Taichi and Toma are now married.
Yes.
In the future. They've got wedding rings. Toma signs his name down as Ichinose, which is Taichi's surname. And, you know, so that's kind of the end. And I feel like it answers the opening question of, like, who would you choose, your best friend or your lover? And the answer is, I don't have to choose.
Mm-hmm.
Which is sweet.
Also, because the final chapter, it's really the last two chapters. The second last chapter is the end point for the main, like, high school story. And then the last couple pages of that are like, oh yes, we broke up after 2 years. It's been, like, 5 years since then. I haven't really spoken to her since. Not because, you know, it was a messy breakup or anything. We just kind of grew apart, and I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't know, like, how we could make a friendship work after this long, blah, blah, blah. And we don't, at that point, we don't really know what's going on in Taichi's life. It's evident he has a partner, but we don't know who it is. But he gets a invitation to her wedding, Futaba's wedding, and because he had just recently, you know, reached out to her on the urging of Toma, and so now the final chapter is Futaba's wedding to a guy we do not know, which is normal. Like, when your high school friends are getting married, it's usually to people that they were not dating in high school and that you may never have known in high school. That's how life works. And so it's this wedding, and so Futaba's obviously getting married, and we see Masumi and her partner, which was kind of a controversial thing as well. And ultimately, we have this reveal that it's not actually Taichi at the wedding, mainly because he's at another wedding for Amiga, his other high school friend, and it is Toma who's representing the couple at Futaba's wedding.
Also, like, Taichi is a short king, and Toma is about 2 feet taller than everyone around him at any given time. So the first person thing makes it pretty clear that unless Taichi is wearing, like, some incredible platform heels.
Just wonderful stilettos, just the tallest shoes. Or stilts.
I would respect that power move, honestly.
Showing up at your ex's wedding with just the tallest platform heels. Dang, what a mood.
What a move. But yeah, so that is the ending that we are sort of leading up to. But in terms of, like, the high school plotline, I guess the main thing that happens that's a turning point in the last third of the series is that Toma kind of comes out in confidence to Mommy. Mm-hmm. Which I think if you're gonna come out to someone in your friend group, she'd be the right one to choose, I feel like. Yeah, so he confesses to her, yeah, I've got a crush on Taichi. But unfortunately, because this is a drama series and everything has to be the most dramatic it could possibly be at any time, his jock friend, Kensuke, overhears this confession, and he is not nearly as chill about it as Mommy is. And he gets into a fist fight with Toma. Shingo also gets involved. They all get suspended for a week, and when they come back, the rumors that Toma is gay and in love with Taichi have gotten through the entire school.
As they do if there's, like, a very large brawl between friends at the, like,
three of the most popular boys in the senior year.
During the, like, cultural festival as well. Like, it wasn't
during the cultural festival.
It's not a good time to have this, like, huge fight. But anyway.
And Mommy's got, like, a black eye, too, so it's like, oh my god, were they fighting over her?
Yeah.
God. But, yeah, so things kind of spiral out of control from there. Kensuke is a big issue. He's, as it turns out, very homophobic. And we also just see Taichi and Futaba dealing with kind of the new information. I think Taichi's struggling less with the fact that Toma's gay and more that his childhood friend has been in love with him all these years.
Yeah, I think it's more so, it's less about, like, oh, I dislike that he's gay, but it's more so, like, he didn't even think about it, he didn't even realize, and also, like, so what does that mean for our relationship at this point? Like, can we still stay friends knowing that he has
and also, like, I think, you know, like when Futaba's like, you know, no, he's considering you seriously, like, Taichi is not necessarily disinterested in Toma. Obviously, we see from the ending. But, like, he'd never considered it as an option, and now that it's on the table, he does have to think about it seriously.
Yes. And that's as a good friend would, I think, like, regardless of your sexuality, when you are presented with that sort of information of someone you care about, legitimately care about, and have for years, you want to take them and their feelings seriously. It's not just like, you know, oh, yeah, let's forget this ever happened. Let's never mention it again.
And then we also see Futaba dealing with the jealousy of, like, this person that she's thought of. She's essentially forced into Toma's role, where Toma sees Futaba as this, like, ideal partner to Taichi. And now Futaba has to wrestle with the same thing going the other direction, that, you know, Toma is her ideal, and he's in love with her boyfriend. And wouldn't they just make a better match, you know?
And she cares about both
'Cause-
of them. Like, it's also like, if he would be happier with him, what am I gonna do? Because obviously I
yeah,
care about Taichi, but I also care about Toma. He's a really good friend to me. So, like,
yeah,
am I getting in the way of this sort of
yeah.
thing?
And that's kind of the way that the rumors spin too, because of the immense popularity gap between Toma and Taichi and Futaba. Is there's people who are like, oh my god, that's so gross, and then there's the other faction of people who are like, you
Oh my
know,
god.
why doesn't
Forbidden
that
love.
bitch get out of the way?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't. I actually think that the handling of the main love triangle here is really good. I really loved like the conversation Futaba and Toma end up having about this is Taichi could communicate better, but I feel like it's realistic that he doesn't, you know?
Yeah.
That he just kind of freezes and he's like, I want to disappear from this earth. But I thought Toma and Futaba had a very like mature and very cute conversation with each other.
And the
they're
resolution to the issue was very well done
Yeah.
as well, I think, and in line with the series' major themes.
Yeah. So that's fine. I don't have issues with that. Other folks, there's been some controversy around how sort of the surrounding characters end up treating this situation. So for me, and like me and G have actually like talked extensively about this area of the series, and I think that we're both kind of on the same page, but to different degrees, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we argue semantics. We basically agree, but there's there's some certain things that as personally you have to assess as to whether they're a huge issue to you or not. And there like this particular portion of the series is not like there's definitely problems, and there's definitely a lot that can be validly criticized, but then there's also stuff like it, but again, like with everything, like it's a personal, like how much will that impact your overall enjoyment of the story, the series, and the perception of it to yourself and when giving recommendations to the series.
Yeah. To put it like the most simply in terms of like how the sort of clumsier missteps in this latter third affect kind of how I view the series and how I would recommend it would be like I would recommend it as a really good drama series, but I would not recommend it for LGBT representation necessarily. And I don't think that it's like hateful or anything, but I think that the flaws in its representation are significant enough that I wouldn't like if someone was asking me for a series with good LGBT representation, this isn't the one that I would go to, because we are far from starved for content in that area right now, and
yes,
when it comes down to it, we should expect more.
And then sort of where I sit on the issue is that it's not so like, again, I wouldn't say like read this if you're looking for LGBT content. Again, there's a lot of very, very good stuff that's coming out right now. We're not in we're not in this desert of like no LGBT content, but I do think that as kind of a vehicle of normalizing LGBT characters in a more mainstream manga, it's still worth reading, and I still think that a lot of people will find relatability in it, despite there being some problematic parts, especially in this latter third, of how certain issues are handled. But it's not like a series I would recommend if you're wanting a realistic or non-problematic LGBT thing. I think it's just an easier or a good introduction, or like for people who don't look for LGBT content, I think it's one that will appeal to them and perhaps make them more open-minded to better handle LGBT content, and like being more open-minded about respecting and wanting to read stories about characters who are within the queer community, despite its flaws of storytelling. Anyway, yeah.
So in terms of like what exactly these missteps we keep dancing around are, so I think the big one comes in one specific chapter. So basically, this whole thing happens. Toma's still, I think, still suspended, or at least he hasn't come back to school yet.
Yeah, he takes a lot of time off. I mean, he's suspended, but then also is like, I don't want to go back to school with all this shit going on.
Yeah, and then also he ends up getting a job and sort of severely reducing how often he comes to school after he starts that job.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's that as well. But basically, Kensuke, Shingo, those two girls, they all, are we want to talk to Taichi, to Ichinose. And they invite him over to, I think, Kensuke's place. And, they're like, we're going to talk. And it's like, okay.
It's like, I don't really know you guys, and this is kind of awkward. Okay.
Well, I think he's like, I am not in a place where I'm ready to talk about this on any level. Still processing, man.
Especially with people I don't really know at all, aside from
I don't know. My main connection to you guys right now is that you punched my best friend in the face. But so he basically doesn't talk through the whole thing, which makes sense. But it makes sense in terms of the realism of how dumb teenagers would handle their feelings. But it is an issue that they are having a secret meeting to talk about Toma, and Toma is nowhere to be found. And he never really gets a chance to kind of counter the things that are said during this, which bothers me a lot. As well as that we don't really have, because the main counterpoint to Kensuke's homophobia is these two girls who don't really come across as very opinionated on the subject. They're kind of just they're trying to cease conflict. They're but we love Toma, can't he love whoever he loves? He's not doing anything wrong. But it's really annoying to not have someone who's just there in the corner of LGBT people in general. Just there are actually arguments that exist for LGBT inclusion and not hating LGBT people that are not just let's not inconvenience other people, It's and we never really get to hear those arguments, and to me that's a big gap. And I just don't think it's responsible not to include that, especially if you're gonna end with a gay ending. It's obviously you're gay people are fine, but you never give them a chance to speak for themselves, because Masumi is so mired in self-hatred at this point in her life, and she does eventually end up with a man, and I would say first of all, her husband is pretty heavily trans-coded, which is interesting.
Yeah, there's two, I guess, conversations about whether or not her husband is trans or whether or not he's cisgendered, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about the ending. There's a question in particular I think we'll be answering. But yeah, so
yeah. But also, like, there's a couple lines in that last chapter that, like, seem to reference Masumi's bisexuality. You know, at least as, like, a bisexual person reading it, I was like, oh, they're implying she's bisexual, but it's not really clear. Yeah, it's just... So basically, Kensuke is like, I think gay people are gross. Guys and girls are fundamentally different and can never get along as friends. You know, I fall in love with girls because they're special. In their special girl way. Spouting all this nonsense, and then drops the bombshell that he thinks gay people are gross because he was molested by a man. And his friends immediately are like, ooh, change the subject. Like, they don't really talk through that at all. It's just kind of there, floating in the ether. It's like,
yeah.
Kaito, why did you include this? What is the reason? That's a hell of a thing to include if you don't have something to say about it.
Yeah. It's and I think, again, this is sort of like the role and I think the need as an author. Obviously, generally, you'd hope that everything in your story has a purpose, and narratively speaking, versus just like wanting to be realistic about a situation, although this isn't inherently realistic. But I think there's also like that kind of issue. One, it just is kind of like these guys aren't actually that great of friends. Like they don't seem to care that much about obviously someone opening up about their trauma, which could be an interesting thing to say about this friend group and where we see them later down the line. Of who's still speaking to whom. And then, but then obviously, like, what does this inclusion, like with, we talked about Devil's Line last month about, like, what does the inclusion of a pedophilic character mean? And then in sort of retrospect to the general kind of representation of devils as, you know, minorities with who aren't as problematic, yeah. So, again, like, was this... again, Ray mentioned, we talked about this a lot, like, off recording. And there's ultimately this thing of, like, both of us like to assume good faith. I don't think the intention for any of this in this conversation is that Kaito thinks that gay people are bad or that, you know, whatever else, but
yeah. And I also don't want to, like, I don't want to assume anything about, like, any marginalized groups that Kaito may or may not be a part of.
Exactly.
You know, it's kind of like there's things that, like, in my head I'm like, this seems like it's coming from someone who maybe is not a part of the LGBT community, but we don't know. So I want to, like, I guess, sort of say very firmly that I don't want to make any assumptions about Kaito.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say, because we don't, like, neither of us like to assume. And generally when it comes to that, you assume in good faith, like, that what is presented is done without the intent to be harmful or without the intent for, like, this really negative portrayal of a marginalized group or really problematic, you know, argument being given more credence than, you know, what they perhaps think. And it's whether or not it's just not being able to put their actual thoughts on the page in a way that comes across the way they intended. Like, it's creation, whether it's writing, art, whatever else, is a very difficult process. And when you are handling themes like, you know, LGBT individuals, it's even, I would say, even Own Voices creators can have an issue of, like, just showing their experience. And so it's like, not everything is going to work for everyone, even if a creator is from that group. And that's why it's important in, like, series like Perfect World, which talks about disability, to have multiple voices, to have multiple perspectives, rather than just like one, and this is correct, and this is you know, we're not going to challenge this at all, despite, you know, other people having different experiences in their life, and whether or not that's truly good representation or not.
Yeah,
So,
and I think, like, a lot of the best, like, LGBT manga that we have, Our Dreams at Dusk being, I think, the most
peak
stellar example.
Yeah.
There is this element of community and, like, many different experiences that is so important. And, you know, talking about disability, you know, this is something we've criticized, for example, like, A Silent Voice for.
Yes.
Where, like, you know, if you compare, like, A Silent Voice and, what's it called? I Hear the Sunspot.
I Hear the Sunspot, yeah.
The thing that I Hear the Sunspot, to me, has over A Silent Voice immediately is the presence of the larger deaf community. You really can't, like, wrap up, you know, an experience with just one person, I guess. And Toma and Masumi are both they're in very negative places in terms of their own sexuality, I think.
Yeah.
Especially Masumi, but Toma as well. He thinks of his queerness, his gayness, as a problem. Like a stain upon himself. He feels like he's betraying his friend. And, you know, Masumi's over here feeling like she can never be happy. So, that is the extent of, like, the perspectives we get, really.
Yeah, and I think part of that is due to this being a drama. Like, you need that inner conflict. Well, you don't need it, but it's an easier way to have the inner conflict if you aren't that self-assured in your sexuality or identity, or if you don't see it as a problem, which again is problematic, but it's not inherently, like, incorrect either. I do think that there are lots of people who,
I think that there are things within, like, Masumi and Toma's experiences that are definitely incredibly relatable. Even just to me, you know, as a bisexual person, but I've seen other people, like, very much relate to, like, these conversations that Masumi and Toma have about their sexuality.
Yeah.
And Toma in particular, I really love the way that his insecurity about his sexuality and, like, being in love with his best friend and, you know, the feeling of having to keep a secret from everyone is sort of very much, like, intertwined with his insecurities about his future. You know, he, I think, is the most aimless out of the main three for a long time, because he just has one directive, and it's like, get out of this house.
Yeah.
He feels suffocated within his house, which you can kind of see, you know, the feeling of keeping this big part of his life a secret from his brother ends up intertwining with, you know, all of these other resentments that he has towards his brother and towards Aki-chan. And he's just like, I want to live freely. I want to be on my own. I want to get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah.
you know? And he doesn't, like, that's why he doesn't want to go to college. It's not any particular resentment towards the idea of college. He's just like, I
I
need
need
to
this
get
personal
out on my
freedom.
own.
Yeah. I need my independence away from other people who have expectations of me, and
Yeah.
try to find happiness for myself, basically.
Yeah. And it's very easy to see how that's intertwined with his personal struggles with, like, you know, his sexuality and stuff as well, which I thought that, again, like, the way he's written is very, I love him a lot. um, but again, it's like, there's this weird gap with Toma. Masumi is, I actually think, like, her conversation with Aki-chan about, like, you know, her sexuality, and being in love with Futaba is probably, like, the highlight of her character for me.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd agree.
that conversation's very sweet in how it shows how, like, even though Aki-chan's a little clueless and she's not saying the best things, it ends up getting through to Masumi because of how sincere she is in genuinely wanting to help. Even if she's completely lost as to how to do that, it's like, sometimes, like, that sincerity, that sincere love, is the most important thing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's an argument to be made, especially for people like Aki-chan, who's outside of the community, doesn't have any kind of personal experience or perspective to give in regards to, like, that specific issue, but genuinely, like, wants to help this person and genuinely, you know, is trying their best to do so, is an important thing to show in this sort of series, because hopefully queer kids will get support from all sorts of people, including those outside of the community. And it's always, even stuff that can be, like, unintentionally hurtful or just unintentionally uneducated, doesn't mean that they're not trying and they're not putting the effort in, which is, again, really good to see in this particular story, handled so well and handled really genuinely.
Yeah. But other than, like, that part, I actually, like, I'm not a big fan of Masumi's character as a whole. I find her a little one note compared to the other characters. It kind of feels like the crush she has on Futaba is kind of it.
Yeah.
We don't really see her going through anything else. And she doesn't really change her opinions on it either. Like, she starts out hating herself and she ends up hating herself. Which is, I think, part of what makes the ending where she ends up with a man, like, more shocking, particularly to queer readers, because it's kind of like, so she hated herself this whole time, you know?
Yeah.
Is this, like, the ultimate form of, like, she hated herself so much that she just decided to settle? Like,
yeah, I think with Masumi in particular, there's an issue in that she's not actually that directly linked to, especially Taichi, like, his personal story, and thus she doesn't get as much of a focus throughout the series as, you know, Futaba and Toma and some of the other characters. And again, all we see is her, like, feelings for Futaba throughout the story, and it's sort of because it's mentioned that she previously dated a lot of guys, but things didn't work out, and part of that is obviously because she was using those relationships to kind of quote unquote fix herself or fix her feelings for Futaba, and that kind of, I think, feeds into this narrative of when we are reading the story of, like, why people would think she's a lesbian versus being bisexual, because at that point her current focus, her current interest is Futaba, and all of the guys that she's dated that she didn't actually have feelings for didn't work out, so she's seen it as like, I can never, I don't have feelings for guys. And we don't see that process of her being more willing or more able to accept, like, it's not that I don't like guys, it's that I don't like these guys because I was hung up on this girl that I liked. So we don't see that process, which is, again, why I think the bisexuality was like, what? Since when? Who? Huh?
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, if they'd just been like, to think Masumi is bisexual,
mm-hmm.
it would have been like, oh, all right. But I think that there's a certain degree of executive meddling going on.
Yeah.
With that entire epilogue as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like Masumi's character is incomplete in a lot of ways. Which is a little disappointing, I guess.
Yeah.
But in terms of Toma, I think he's a much better character than Masumi.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's still like, there's just a couple areas where it feels like we should be getting more of his perspective. And part of it is a certain aspect of his character where he is extremely conflict avoidant.
Yes.
He is definitely the kind of character to just laugh things off and clam up. Like, if in order to avoid an argument, he'll just stop talking.
Yeah, he's definitely a peacemaker in that he doesn't want people to be fighting, especially not about him. So he's just gonna avoid that topic entirely.
Yep, and I think he also part of his insecurity is that on some level he thinks that he is the problem in any conversation that's about him, which just leads him to run away even more. He's like, I don't want to talk about this because it'll come out that I'm actually at fault for everything in my life.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool to see, like, a bunch of characters with essentially the same insecurities who deal with those insecurities in such wildly different ways is very true to life, I think.
Yeah.
But it does also lead to Toma sometimes getting the short end of the stick in terms of, like, the progression of his arc and clarifying some things about his character. If we had more chapters that were from his perspective, like we do with Futaba, we get quite a few chapters from her perspective, then I think that maybe that could have been avoided. But as it stands, it's like I described to you the other day. I was like, he feels like this beautiful, like, scenic jigsaw puzzle with just two or three pieces that just weren't in the box. And it's a really weird gap. Like, it feels like there's something there if I could just reach out and touch it, but it's like a mirage. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely agree that a part of that is because of, like, editorial not wanting this character to necessarily have as much of a focus in this shonen romance.
Yeah. I noticed how long it took for them to actually use the word gay.
Yeah.
On reread, because, like, the first, the person that you like is, and then, cut, change scene, It's like, you're just like me, instead of saying, like, you're gay as hell. It's only after he gets sort of outed to the whole school that they finally start saying, he's gay, he likes Taichi. So I'm like, that kind of smells like some
and
arguments going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and at that point, it's definitely like, well, the series is popular enough that we're not going to get cancelled if we say, you know, the gay word. So you can say it now. Like
it's close enough to the end that, like, yeah. Fuck it.
Yeah. For as wonderful as this series is, it is still technically a jump title. It is still, you know, there are still things that this is doing that a lot, like, the general magazine would not want for its audience, and which is sad, but the fact that it did get so popular is definitely a good sign that, you know, things are changing and we may see more stuff like this, perhaps even better handled. It's an interesting one because it's pushed the envelope and to what to expect, like with a lot of stuff, like when we have LGBT characters in any sort of media, for all of its problems, you know, what it's been able to do is something of merit, regardless of whether or not you like the series or you agree with all of the series' choices at the end of the day. Like with Number 6, like with Yuri on Ice, like with, you know, these sorts of titles.
Yeah, I think Yuri on Ice is strong. Like, I would recommend that one as LGBT representation, I think.
Yes.
But yeah, Blue Flag. It's got a couple stumbles, but very good.
Yeah, was there
anything else you wanted?
No, I think just generally it's a really solid series, especially if you like character-focused drama, if you like well-written characters of all, like, both genders. I think it's, again, if you like realistic high school teenagers, it has plenty of that in spades. It's not perfect, and I don't think with the limitations it had in various situations that it was ever going to be a perfect series, but for what it is, it's pretty dang great.
And I think that I would highly recommend it as just a drama. It's, I think certain parts of the series are some of the best writing that I've seen within a drama series in manga. Certainly some of the best character writing. It's really, really good.
Yeah, and out of the two Kaito series that I've read, it's certainly an interesting step for the creator. I think it's definitely helped them improve a lot. Not that cross-manage was bad, but I think just paneling, like the artistically, it's just done really, really well. It's a beautiful series in a lot of different ways. And again, that strength of the writing, with both humorous and very serious topics, is just, really, really good. So check it out. Support Viz and their print release or their digital release. Yeah.
If you are learning Japanese, I would also recommend picking up the Japanese volumes. One of my top recommendations in terms of Japanese practice. So, that too.
Yeah.
So, shall we finish out with some questions?
Yeah. And we got a lot. Thank you guys so much for your wonderful questions.
Yep. All right. So first we've got a few questions from Rin at Rin Reads Manga. Number 1. What did you feel like could have been handled better, especially in terms of the LGBT plus rep? We've talked about it. Again, it's obviously less ambiguity in terms of the ending would have been greatly helpful. And I think more Toma chapters, like from his perspective, would have been a big help as well.
Yeah, I think anything that would have expanded a little bit more on the personal stories of Toma and Masumi as well would make it a little bit easier for some people to swallow the ending. But again, I think that's mainly due to magazine and like expectations and that, you know, what could and couldn't be shown, done, said.
I also think that that chapter, that particular chapter,
Uh-huh.
really would have benefited from some follow up.
Mm-hmm.
I know I was saying like it would have been nice if Mommy had been in the room because it feels like she would be the most the loudest dissenting voice against Kensuke in that situation, and it's kind of
Yeah.
weird that she wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
But just like anything, you know, maybe when Toma and Futaba were talking, they talk a little bit about like his identity and that it's okay or whatever, or he talks about his feelings about it a little more concretely. Anything at all to like make sure that your points of view that you're offering aren't just antipathy and apathy exclusively. That was a weird choice, and that is what I would change. Number 2 is thoughts on the ending and the reception it received. So, I think that, like, the sort of criticism or backlash that's related to, like, being disappointed with the ambiguity of it, questioning the decision to have Masumi end up with a man, the pacing being kind of abrupt or too quick. I think that's all fair. Don't have any issues with those criticisms. I think that people who are like, you know, upset that it ended in a gay way, or like saying that Taichi never showed any interest in Toma, or you know, that it's like an SJW conspiracy or something, that's kind of like
A bit
dumb.
leery. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely the same. Personally, I didn't really have an issue with any of the aspects of the ending. I can 100% understand and sympathize with people who did have issues with it. But ultimately, like, for me, one of the largest things was that I wanted these characters to end up happy, and for the most part, the entire part, these characters seem to be that. And whether or not we saw that entire development, I don't know if, because the thing is, like, some of the larger themes was about like making choices that make you happy regardless of whether or not other people understand them or like would make those choices. And that's what we see in this epilogue of these characters have made choices that might not seem logical or might not be choices that we would make, but they seem to be happy, and that's, you know, really what you need for your own life. Like, you shouldn't be trying to please anyone else aside from yourself, and hopefully your partner or whoever else is in your life that you
I
care
also
about.
think that I also think it's kind of a continuation of sort of one of my favorite monologues is, I think, Taichi talking about, like, you know, because the series will have these, like, poetic beginnings and endings to chapters, right? And there was one that was talking about, you know, like, the inexorable passage of time and how, like, you know, before you know it, you're standing on top of a mountain made of decisions you didn't even realize were decisions in the moment.
Yeah.
And now you just have to kind of, you know, leap onto the next rung, using whatever information that you have now, and you never really know, like, what is this choice going to lead to? You know, what is the next mountain of choices that I didn't even know I was making going to lead to? The ending kind of exemplifies that with, like, you know, some characters end up exactly where they said they were going to end up in high school, and plenty of other characters are just, like, completely moved on with their life, doing completely different things, not even thinking about high school anymore at all.
Which is Good, because that's how life
Yeah.
works, you know?
Yep. I don't think about high school very much.
No, not at all.
Um,
And that's something as well, I think, is when I see people disappointed in the ending insofar as, like, Taichi and Futaba not ending up together, and we talked about this earlier as well, of, like, that's not how relationships work. Like, it's quite rare that people are marrying their high school sweetheart, especially their first real romantic partner.
Also, Taichi did marry his high school sweetheart.
Yeah.
The other one.
Yeah. But, like, it just leads into that realistic, like, yeah, you know, some people, they know what they want to do. They do that and they're very happy with that. Other people, you know, they're in a totally different situation. They made totally different choices after high school, and that's, you know, that's life. And it's not inherently wrong, or, and in fact, it's almost guaranteed to be really healthy if you're not as your high school self in your 20s.
I almost see it kind of as reassuring to maybe the high school audience reading the series, because it's like, you know, these characters are dealing with the crushing weight of having to decide their entire future right now, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, a big conflict in the latter half of the series is that they're all just, like, they have to focus on entrance exams, you know? They can't really think too much about all of this drama going on in their personal lives because they have to worry about entrance exams.
Yeah.
But, you know, seeing them in the future having just, you know, high school having just been a moment in their lives, and that they're just kind of making things work day by day. I think that's kind of reassuring when you're a teenager.
Yes.
To see that, you know, high school doesn't matter all that much.
Yeah. I mean, because I remember from my high school days, which was a decade ago now, just the absolute, in a similar way, just the absolute importance of, like, oh, you need to know what you want to do, you need to know, you know, what you want to study, and then that'll be your, you know, your life after high school. You're making all of these choices, and really nobody I know is doing what they thought they wanted to do in high school. You know, there's we all as teens have zero clue what we want in our life, especially occupation wise. So it's you know, there's, and so when people are like, well, I wish I knew what these characters were doing, like, job-wise, especially, like, Toma and Taichi, and Futaba as well. It doesn't actually matter. Does it actually matter if we know what they're doing? Not really. Just so, like, because that's, again, like, there's not necessarily a huge chance that they're going to be doing. I mean, sometimes it would be wonderful if Taichi was, you know, in game engineering, like game design, not video game design, but like tabletop and toy design, that sort of stuff. But, you know, it's if he found something else he enjoyed more, that's great as well. And sometimes you're working and it doesn't have to be your passion. Just so long as your personal life is doing well, that's all you really need.
Yeah. I do kind of want to know if he went into toy design, though. Selfishly. Number 3 is favorite character and underappreciated characters. My favorite character is either Toma or Mami.
Yeah.
Probably Toma and then Mami. And underappreciated characters, Tomoe. Absolute goddess queen, 10-foot tall energy, like.
Yeah.
Actually, I quite like Yorkie. I think he's a good friend.
My favorites are basically the exact same as yours. I think those two are definitely handled. I like Taichi a lot. Like, he has his problems and he's struggling, but that's being a teenager, and he's very relatable, I think, as a protagonist as well. I also under or unappreciated characters or underrepresented characters. I think Aki is a really good character. Like she's very I just like her and her energy, and she's trying her damnedest, guys. She might not get it right all the time, but she's very genuine with everything that she does, and I think that's really nice to see, especially for a character who is trying to be a mother figure and is also going to be an actual mother, and there's two different points in her life of now coming into this role in a different way, and trying to, which is more of herself, which is ultimately, like, they're both her, and they're both very important to her. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I like Seiya a lot, too, actually.
Yeah. I mean, again, all of these characters are really great for the most part.
I was going to say, for, like, kind of underappreciated characters, and I think that we neglected to talk about her as much as she deserves, but, Futaba is a really good character. She's great. I really relate to her kind of struggles with kind of... I feel like she's the kind of person who, like, she keeps getting told that, like, everyone's got their talents, you're going to find that thing that you love that you're really good at, or, like, because you love it so much, you're going to be really good at it. And she's finding that the thing that she really loves, she's not actually very good at.
Yeah.
And that realization is heartbreaking. And it's like, Taichi, like, knows how much she loves gardening and raising flowers. So when he visits the gardening club, it wasn't Taichi. Was it Taichi or Toma? I don't remember. Toma. But, yeah, he knows how much she loves gardening and that she's in the gardening club. And he's like, wow, are any of these yours? And she's like, yeah, the small one. And he's, like, looking at it, and it's like, yeah, obviously the one that's, like, struggling the most. And he's like, I don't know what to say.
Keep working on it. Futaba, I think, for me, is probably the character... I mean, I'm shades of a lot of these characters, but I think she really was me in high school. I was probably a bit more outspoken and less shy than she was, but she definitely is like, whoa, man, that's my high school experience right there. Like, just... So, yeah, I think, especially when we're talking about the main characters, Toma and Taichi get a lot of the focus, as they deserve to, but this really is a 3-character piece. All 3 of them are as important to each other and to the story as any singular one. So it's kind of... I hope more people do talk about Futaba, because she deserves to be talked about. She's really, really good as a character.
I also feel like, her meekness and her social anxiety... obviously very relatable to me. I couldn't do anything in front of people in high school. And I feel like people see a character like that who's like 17 or whatever, and they're like, that's so annoying, so, why can't she just do it? And, like, the fact that she seems so happy in, like, the epilogue chapter... And the fact that she's working so hard, like, throughout the series, it tells me that, just like myself, college for me was, like, getting better and better at public speaking for a lot of it. And getting more confident in my speech. Like, stuff that, presenting at symposiums or, like, my thesis defense or whatever that I did in college is stuff that would have been, like, on another planet for me in high school, right?
Yeah.
I would break down before every presentation. But it's like, life doesn't end with high school, and I feel like it's nice to kind of have a character who, like, has realized that she has these things that are really difficult for her, and she's
Mm-hmm.
working really hard to change them, but it's also not like she suddenly becomes misconfident overnight. She's still very nervous, and she stutters over all of her words, you know? But
She's
it's
being
like
very
she's working
proactive.
towards it, and
Yeah.
you definitely get the feeling that she's, she's gonna get towards where she wants to be, eventually,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's doing her damnedest to like try and be closer to her ideal, which we find is Toma. And then
Yeah.
and it's really like reassuring that she's aware of what the things she can change, and she's aware of the things she can't change. In the first volume, you have the discussion of like, oh, Toma's ideal is like tall, black hair, black long hair, big boobs, whatever, and they're like, well, just cross all of that. He wouldn't care about any of that. He's
not that kind of guy. I think it was such a cool, like, I guess, landmark for her character, like when or turning point, I guess, when Taichi's going on about, like, we're gonna go to the same college, and she's, like, had been thinking on her own, like, trying to decide which college she actually wanted to go to, and she was like, look, Taichi, I gotta be honest. I feel like she wouldn't have had the confidence to have that conversation before, or she would have been much more swayed by, like, I want to be with this person who I know, So, yeah, lots of great characters.
Lots of great characters.
Tales at Tales of Color asks us for our best ship, which is Taichi and Toma.
Yep. I love them. They're great. I think Seiya and Akio or Akiko are really like solid insofar as like a relationship that's established. They've been together for a lot of years, and like how that dynamic works as well, which is nice to see.
Yeah, they're good.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We have Stories on Shelves at Storied Shelves asking a couple different questions. Number one is, how has Kaito's art and or storytelling changed from previous series? I have not read Cross Manage, so go for it.
I would say, I'd say probably the biggest difference is that the paneling is a little less, I guess, condensed compared to Cross Manage, and that series, obviously, as the sports series, has a different energy to Blue Flag. I think there's a little bit more consistency in the overall tone with Blue Flag. There's been a definite improvement, not necessarily in like anatomy or anything, with Kaito's previous works, but as I mentioned earlier, like this has a definite different atmosphere to a lot of the other stuff in its genre, and it has a definite different atmosphere to Cross Manage because they're two different stories. They're telling two different things, and there's almost like Ray said like a drama feel to it. There's also like I would say more of a shoujo feel just with paneling and that quiet. There's a lot of sequences where there's no words, there's nothing being said, and you just experience it through the images on the page, which is not something that shonen manga does ever, if at all.
Yeah.
Like the only example I can think of is the one chapter of Hunter x Hunter, like at the World Tree. But like usually it's not something that's commonly done. So
yeah, one scene that I found myself like reading a few times over because I just thought it was so beautifully laid out was when Toma confesses to Taichi, and just like, they're facing different directions, Toma's looking at Taichi, but Taichi's looking off in the distance.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of, the distance between them is emphasized, but then also the closeness between them. We get to see, like, you see, like, the eyes shifting gaze and then what they're looking at, the shadows on the ground. You feel, like, the evening chill and,
Yeah.
It's, yeah, the nonverbal storytelling is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. It's so beautiful. Like, I cannot emphasize enough how beautiful Blue Flag is. It's just really good, especially if you are someone who's more familiar with, like, general shonen manga and their art style and, like, how they set up their panels, the type of energy it has. It's a nice change of pace.
Yep. So number 2 is going to be, what aspects of Blue Flag do you feel make it different from other series in similar settings? We kind of just answered that.
Yeah. I mean, also, it's nice to have a love triangle that's actually a triangle. It's nice to have a shonen romance that isn't just like a harem of girls around one guy. It's, there's a lot of things here that are different from the norm, and it's well worth reading for that alone.
The fact that Futaba feels like a genuine, actual, like, shy girl, and Mommy feels like a genuine, actual, like, outgoing girl, instead of, like, weird fantasies of those two personality types.
Yeah, we don't have nice. Weird tropes of, like, tsunderes and all of this other shit. It's just like, these are actual people who exist.
Yeah. And then what are some of your favorite elements or features of Kaito's art style? Like I said about the nonverbal storytelling, as well as, again, just the subtlety of expression.
The expressiveness is really, like, the facial expression is so beautiful. The Kaito draws eyes, like, sometimes their eyes are just, ooh. You can tell everything from just a singular look. But also I really like how well balanced the, I guess, quote-unquote proper art style and then this chibified style is used. It's done really, really well.
I was gonna say, like, I love Kaito's chibis. They're adorable.
They're
so cute.
Adorable, they're funny, and it's always, like, there's never too much of it in the story. It's always done really well in the moments that need it.
Yeah, I love, like, Taichi's chibi is really cute, but I think my favorite is that big dumb smile that they give Toma.
Yeah.
Like, that just looks like the Walmart smiley face. I love that.
Oh.
Yeah, and then next we've got from Loom Ranma Yasha, at Loom Ranma Yasha, who I believe you said you just did a podcast about Blue Flag with them as well. So
yes, so check out that. It hasn't been posted yet, but there's a couple different people on there, including the letter of the print release for Blue Flag, which gives a lot of really interesting insight. So check that one out. I will link it in the description once it's been posted. I don't think it's online as of yet. So, yeah.
We've got a very specific localization question with a joke where they're deciding what to call Futaba because they decided that she's very similar to a hamster. So they're like, so she's like a hamster lady? So, and there's this really weird picture of, like, a very buxom, like, superhero lady with, like, a hamster face, like a photorealistic hamster face. And it's like, well, that seems like it would be difficult to translate in a way that makes sense. And in the Japanese, he's, like, coming up with different names. He's like Hamuredi, which sounds like a superhero name in Japanese, so that's the joke. So I guess the online like Manga Plus translation that was a simul translation,
Yeah.
just says a hamster lady,
Mm-hmm.
but the new translation says Hamra, Queen of Hamsters. So we are supposed to choose Hamster Lady or Hamra, and I am fully in the Hamra camp. I think that makes more sense as a joke.
It makes more sense. It matches the visuals a lot better, I think. And, I mean, that's what a good localization does. It retains the kind of humor of the piece for the audience.
Yep. And then also, from the same person, we've got, in general, what are your thoughts on how the Manga Plus and Viz translations differ? Are there any nuances between them that you feel affects your impressions of the story in any way? I read the series in Japanese, so...
I think, like with any simulpub versus, like, print release, there's always going to be some sort of cleaning up of translation and localization, because it's hard to get 30 pages of a story out within the hour that Japan has released it. So sometimes, like, consistency, little things like that are always good. I think the way that a lot of these characters speak in the I've only read the first volume in print, obviously. That's the only one that we have out right now. But something that really made me aware, like, I really noticed, was how Toma and his friends, especially Mommy and the other girls, speak in the print is very, like, very high school girl, like, type, which is a little not as obvious necessarily. I mean, forgive me, I haven't read the first chapter of the simulpub in a long time, but it was more obvious to me, like, the type of girl or character this was meant to be, just for, again, as we said, like, very clear voices, and it's done really, really well with that in the print version. I also think the lettering is wonderful. Just all of it, the background and the actual bubbles. It's a good job.
Yeah, and I feel like people assume that when girls talk like Valley Girls or whatever, that's like a localization choice, but like no, they talk like teenage girls. They have a very exaggerated way of speaking in the Japanese as well. I mean, it feels very real to like how those kinds of teenage girls would talk, but yeah. Also, what's your favorite piece of art in the series, be it a panel, title page, cover, etc.? I think I would actually go with that sequence that I was talking about where Toma confesses to Taichi. I just think that it's everything I love about Kaito's artwork there in a couple pages.
It's beautifully done. I also think that Futaba's confession to Taichi with the fireworks at the festival is just again, it's a wordless sequence, but it's completely, like, we know exactly what's happening, and then it cuts between those two, like, amidst the stalls, and then Toma and Masumi watching the fireworks alone, waiting for them. It's just, it's so good.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it, but, like, the use of lighting in this series is so good.
Yeah.
Like, dramatic lighting. I mean, the hamster picture's pretty good, too.
I really like all of the little chibi animal versions of themselves that they have like at the end or between chapters.
Yeah, they're so cute. Alright. So next we have from Chio at _Chio_. The ending, though unexpected, was really satisfying for me. The main and side characters had pretty good endings for the most part, but I would have liked to have seen some reference or mention to Toma's goals. Did he start work, baseball, or university? Or were you guys satisfied with the ending for what it is? Or would you have liked the longer chapter to add a bit more detail to the characters' current lifestyles? They say, I kind of think of it as they've grown older, their dreams and aspirations would naturally changed as well. I mean, Toma just immediately goes into the workforce, so I assume he's just hopping from either he would have stayed in the same trade job or hopped between a few. He definitely was not starved for options.
Yeah.
He's friendly, he gets along with everybody, and he's built like a truck.
Yeah, like we said, I think it ultimately there's no real reason to know what they're doing, like occupation wise. We get all of the most important information with their personal lives, and I feel like the style of like the reveal, I guess, of, you know, the fake out of it was Toma the whole time wouldn't have worked with a longer chapter either. You know, if you had 50 pages or whatever versus the 30. It's just, yeah, I think it, for what it is, and again, there's an argument of like whether or not the ambiguity was necessary or was handled well. You know, each person takes that as their own, like how they handle it. But for me, I didn't have an issue with it, and I was very satisfied with that ending for how it was presented and how it wrapped up the story in its entirety and tied those final themes of happiness and of choosing between, you know, lover and best friend was done really, really well.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that we've already talked about at length that I would have preferred less ambiguity on, or preferred like an extra perspective on. But overall, I was fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the last two questions are from Scoot at Saki-chan Z2C. We've got, is this a good manga to read since I haven't read it? The answer is yes.
Yes.
And then who's your favorite character? Who's your favorite character is, yeah, like I said, it's between Toma and Mami for me.
Mm-hmm. And I'm the same. Basically ditto.
That's all.
So, with that, we have come to the end of the podcast. Thank you guys so much again for listening to this month's topic. Hopefully we've encouraged you to at least try the series if you hadn't really heard of it, didn't know much about it, or given you our insight on certain things for those who have read it and may have similar or completely different takes on the series and different opinions.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to take different things in the series, so definitely let us know your own opinions on the series if you've read it in the comments below, and we'll be happy to get into discussion with you, I'm sure.
Yeah, we love your comments, and please give them to us. Next month is in a somewhat similar vein. We are going to be talking about LGBT manga, so manga that is actually about LGBT themes, generally also written by LGBT creators, because next month is Pride Month. Although the world may be burning and events aren't happening, we will still be celebrating in our own way. And so let us know your questions to this genre, to any particular title, anything like that, any particular creator as well. I will, of course, have the Twitter, about it, so follow me on Twitter if you are wanting to leave a comment there, or if you're just interested in my thoughts. You can also leave questions for future episodes in the comments below too. As always, my links to everything are in the description, as are Ray's. Please follow her on her channel, Whimsical Pictures, and on Twitter. It's great. If you're not following her, what are you doing? Otherwise,
my Twitter is garbage. Definitely follow it.
And so with that, I think we can see you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye till then.
Thanks, guys. Bye.